In this video we're going to go through the candidate and contact portals that are now available with Colleague 7. It's going to be a fairly in-depth video looking at how those portals are set up, ultimately how they're enabled from a user perspective actually within Colleague in terms of against the candidates and the contacts, and then going through looking at it from the perspective of the candidates logging into the portal and also then the contact logging into their portal and the functionality that is available to them. But we start effectively within the admin area looking at user group permissions. When going into user group permissions, effectively on selection of your associated user group permission or the permissions or the users that you want to enable this functionality to, you select that specific user group, and then you would go to the candidate permission group, and there'll be an option here to allow user to create a candidate portal user, and that needs to be set to full access. There's also one that's available against the contact record as well. Again, it allows you to create a login for the contact in the portal. And that needs to be set to full access. And on the basis of those settings being set to full access, when in the candidate and contact record, you'll have that functionality available to you. So that's the first stage. So the next step along will be to create a candidate's portal user. This is done so within the candidate record. Off the View More menu. Again, this is on the basis that that user group permission that we've just gone through is enabled against the candidate's permission group. Providing that that is enabled, then you'll have this option to create a portal user from here. This option changes once a portal user has been created against the candidate record, but we'll go through that in a moment. So providing that user group permission is enabled, you'll have the Create Portal User option here. And on selection of that, it will essentially just bring down a drop-down list of the available usernames or the usernames that it's seen that you want to assign to the user. And this is basically fed from the two email addresses. You've got the email address and then you've got a secondary email address. And essentially it's asking you which username, which email address are you going to use to be that portal username for that candidate record. So if we select this one here and then we hit save, that will create a portal user. Now the confirmation message of the portal user does give you the username, the PIN number, the password as well, the initial password that's going to be used by the candidate when they're first logging into the portal, and also just give some instruction there to advise that the candidate will be asked to specify a new password when they first log in. So you've obviously been given those details there. However, you do have those details available to you through merge fields. So the idea is that off the back of creating a portal user, you can then go to email, and then you could use either the merge fields that are within here, or you could use a template. So if I use a template here, which is candidate portal login details, you can see here there's a template here, hi known as part of the registration. You've been set up with a login to the candidate portal, and then it gives their login details. And if I hit preview on there, you can see that obviously the details of their portal users have been brought through as part of the password, as part of the registration. So what you can do is obviously send off those password details to the candidate, and then obviously they'll then receive that information so they can proceed with logging in. Now from the user's perspective, obviously the colleague user's perspective, what they can also do in the event of looking to review either the portal user or deactivate the portal user is they can return to that view menu option here, or view more menu option here, and see portal details. When they're in a candidate record that's obviously got a portal account, they'll be able to select portal details there, and then you can see that the portal user is here, the PIN number is here, and whether or not it's active or not has been specified here. And you have the option to deactivate a portal user from within here, so you can actually turn off access for that candidate to access that portal from there. So before we move on to the login process on the portal, what I wanted to do is quickly just go back to the admin area and just show you where the portal users from a data perspective are actually held, and that's within the users area. So if you're within admin and you go to users, what you'll note is that there's this option to include portal users in the users table. So if you set that to yes, and you type in here portal users, what you'll find essentially is that all of the portal users that have been created on the system are contained within this area. Each portal user, in terms of how it's set up, the PIN number prefixes the portal user name, and ultimately if you need to access this area to you can use it to, you can come into here to deactivate users if you want to, but essentially the main reason to come into this area, for example, this is the portal user we've just created, is to reset the user's password, the candidate's password. So if it's a case that for whatever reason you need to reset their password, then you can use this functionality here to enter in a new password, and that will obviously allow them to proceed with that new password that you've specified rather than the one that was automatically generated. So these are where the portal user passwords are held within the system, just for your information. So the final point to cover just before we go into the candidate portal is the placement record. So what we've done now is we've placed this candidates that we generated a candidate portal user against into a placement. And that's because within the candidate portal there is the means obviously to submit timesheets. So this is the placement that we'll use for the timesheets that will be submitted from the portal for this particular portal user. And in terms of what's different from the placement perspective to be mindful of, one is that within the rates area, obviously the standard rate will be available to the user to record their units against, but you'll have additional rates as well, and you'll have the option of show in portal as a yes/no field, and that's available as a yes/no option when you're creating the user or creating the rate or editing the rate. So obviously advising this will dictate whether or not that portal, whether or not that rate then appears within the portal when a timesheet has been submitted. Also moving over to the timesheet section, the options that you specify here are going to dictate the type of timesheet that the candidate can submit. So based on whether or not the timesheet type has been specified as weekly, monthly calendar, or monthly for 4 and 5 weeks, is going to essentially drive the type of timesheet that candidate can enter, and the same to be said for the period end date as well. So based on the specified period end date, that is how the timesheet that's been drawn and created by the candidate, how that's going to be configured and how it's going to work for them. And obviously their timesheets would then pre-fill into this area as they're being submitted. So those are the key points of note. Also, all timesheets received, once this has been set to yes, you'll note obviously within colleague, if you set this to yes, it removes the option to add a new timesheet, and that's the same to be said from the portal user perspective as well. So once a timesheet, once all timesheets received flag has been set to yes against the placement, that removes the ability for new timesheets to be added to this placement, and ultimately it removes the option for the portal user to also submit timesheets to the placement as well. So that's an important option to be aware of as well. But those are the features in relation to the placement record. So we're now at the point where we're looking at the portal itself, the portal login. Now in terms of how the portal is set up, it can be done in a couple of different ways for clients. Obviously, not to point out the obvious, what you're going to be witnessing is a colleague branded portal, but the branding of the portal is often changed based on the client's requirements. So the logo is changed, the image can be as per the client's request in terms of an advised image, or we can suggest some other images that are relevant to your business to be displayed. And in terms of how this would then sit actually within your website, it can either be set up as its separate own portal. From your website there would be a link to say log into the portal, and then it would go off to this different area, and we'd set it up so that it would be essentially with a domain similar to this. So it would say your company name, but it would have .colleague7.com afterwards, and then that way ultimately that would sort of fully integrate through that page. The alternative route is that if you have web developers and an ability for this to be embedded into your website, that option is available to you as well. Obviously, it just requires that your web developers are involved in terms of setting that up. But once the portal is branded as per your requirements and it's launched within the website, what we'll now do is go through the process of logging in the candidate record, or log in the candidate portal user that we set up before. So if I put in the candidate username, I'll put in his PIN number, and then I'll put in what was the initial password that was provided as part of that login process. So if we go to sign in, what we'll see is that we've been taken basically to a page where we're being asked to enter in a new password. And this is going to be the password that we're going to use moving forwards. And obviously the password has certain parameters. It needs to be at least 6 characters long. It needs to contain at least one number. It must have at least one lowercase number and one uppercase number. So I will specify a password here. Also make a note of it here as well, and then I'll save that new password. So what that basically means now is that that password has been saved. So if I now enter in my details again with our new password, sign in, and what you'll get is this message to advise that there's a current session. That's because the first session where you tried to log in created that as a session. You hit yes on that, and then you'll log in, and ultimately that means now that your password is set up, and it will be that way moving forwards. You can also save it into the browser so that the next login process is a bit more slick. But you land within the login page of the candidate portal on the profile. So once you've logged in, you'll be shown some fields. Now these fields are defined by you in terms of what you want to display to the candidate. So if it's a case that you're seeing certain fields that you wish were present on this portal page that are not, it is possible to obviously have those added. Likewise, if you're seeing fields that you wish weren't there, they can also be removed as well. So the next thing that we're going to cover is the submission of a timesheet. So within this area, obviously you have the profile option, you have placements, and you have sign outs. We'll go to placements, and what this will do is list the placements that the candidate has been placed in a current placement that is contract and that there are timesheets to submit against. And then from the candidate side, or at this point the contractor side, they have the ability to then add a timesheet here. So they can hit on the plus sign, and that will launch the timesheet form. Now you'll notice that, well, with the placement that we put this candidate into, there were 3 rates that we set to be showing in the portal, so that's why we've got our 3 different columns here. We specified our period end date as being Sunday, or period end day as being Sunday, and obviously we're starting midweek because this is from the start date. This is the first timesheet, so we're starting midweek. So if we enter in some rates here, this is an hourly, so we'll put, say, 5 days there, 6 there, maybe 3 there, and then on Saturday, let's say, let's put some overtime there, and let's say that the weekends, let's put 4 there and 3 there. What you can also do is enter some example notes about the timesheet into this area, and you can also add a document. So if you wanted to click this option and you've got a document to upload, a supporting documentation in relation to the timesheet, they can hit choose file there, select a file, and that file is obviously going to be created alongside with the timesheet. So if we hit save there, that obviously creates our timesheet, it uploads the document, and from their perspective, what they now have is a timesheet which they have submitted that is pending approval. Whilst a timesheet is pending approval, I mean, from their perspective, obviously they just see the unit count, they don't see the associated pay rate versus charge rate. There's obviously no appreciation of margin. So from their perspective, they see the total number of units, and they obviously have an ability to view whether or not the timesheet has been approved, or if there's any kind of query with regards to it. But whilst it's at a state of pending approval, they also have the option to edit the timesheet as well. So from the pencil icon that you see here, they've got the option to edit timesheets. They can click on that, and that launches the timesheet. Again, the rates in terms of their specific description are obviously shown here, and the numeric values are shown here. So if they want to change that, then they can do so, and obviously hit save there again, and that saves the timesheet. So from the candidate's perspective, that's what they would do on that either weekly or monthly process in terms of going into the portal, going to this area and submitting their timesheet. So from the contractor's perspective, they've done their bit and they can now sign out of the portal. what we'll now do is we'll sign in as the contact to view the timesheet submission. So what we'll now do is look at this from the perspective of the contact, and we'll also cover it in a couple of different angles as well, a couple of different routes. You've got obviously one route in that you may want ultimately for candidates to submit their timesheets and for you to essentially process them yourself, as opposed to requesting that the client review those timesheets and approve them. In that scenario, effectively, if we go back to our placement, from the timesheets tab of our placement here, you can see obviously the timesheet that was submitted off the back of the candidate logging into the portal and submitting their timesheets. The details obviously are obviously all held here, as you would expect, as if you had submitted it yourself. From the candidate's perspective, from the contact's perspective, if they're looking to now be part of this process in terms of approving the timesheet, they would obviously go through the same process from your part in terms of creating a portal user against a contact. That's exactly the same workflow as it was if you were as when you were in the candidate record. From the contact record, you obviously go to view more, you create the portal user, you send the portal details. Again, they would go through the process of setting their password, and then when they want to log into the portal, they can just hit sign in and they log into the portal. From a contact's perspective, again, the fields that you're seeing here are as part of the standard branded demo version of the portal. Obviously, this would be as per what you would like the contact to be able to see. But the key thing is obviously they have a timesheet section here, and within the timesheet section it's going to contain all of the timesheets that are pending approval, which are relating to placements which the contact is either the main contact for, or they're down as being an approver for. So obviously within a placement, if we go back to a placement record and we go to the back office tab, there is actually this approvers section of a placement. So you could actually have other contacts that are able to approve timesheets, and they could log into portals and obviously see timesheets that have obviously been submitted against those placements they're related to. But from the contact's perspective, if they were reviewing these timesheets, they'd have the ability to view any associated documentation that's been uploaded as part of the submitted timesheet. They can obviously see the details of the timesheet and confirm whether or not they are happy with that. They can either update the timesheet status by specifying that it should be on hold, or they could set it to OK. But what is designed to be the case is that you obviously hit select all. If there are multiple timesheets, they'd all be selected, and then you can just hit approve selected timesheets. Also, if they've got timesheets on hold, they could choose to view the ones that are on hold there as well. So yeah, if we just set the status of pending approval, hit approve there, and that obviously now approves that timesheet. If I go back to here, if I refresh there, we'll obviously be able to see now that that timesheet has been approved by the contact. So this timesheet is now in a status of OK, and that basically means that it's now going to appear within the back office area and allow essentially for an invoice to be generated against it. So that's from the perspective of the contact actually submitting the time or approving the timesheet. Sorry. If I go to the placement and I open up this timesheet and I actually set it back to being pending approval, so kind of reverting the change that was just made. The other route to reviewing the timesheet is from timesheet management. So let's say that the contact is not using the contact portal. The candidates are submitting their timesheets, and it's up to yourself in terms of reviewing those timesheets as they come in. So within the back office area, you've got a section that's called timesheet management. And ultimately what you can do within timesheet management is if you click on update timesheet status, and if we view timesheets, there are status of pending approval. This lists all of the timesheets that have been submitted that are pending approval, and this is our timesheet that is obviously pending approval at the moment. So the alternative route is that you choose to select these timesheets, review these timesheets based on what's been submitted against the placement, and then update those timesheets and obviously setting them to OK, which then obviously updates those timesheets and then puts them in a position where they can now be processed within Generate Invoices. So that's the mechanism that you would use to oversee the timesheets that are being submitted into the system via candidates through the portals, and then approving them yourself, and then so you can then move on to generating an invoice. So that concludes the run through of the candidate and contact portals that are available with Colleague 7. If you're interested in or would like some further information in regards to the portals, please reach out in the first instance to our support team, and they'll be able to take you through the process of how these are implemented and what's involved. Thank you.